The porch light wasn't on. That was the first thing I noticed. Every Thanksgiving for as long as I could remember, Grandma Helen kept the porch light on from noon until midnight. She said it was a beacon, a way of telling everyone that her door was always open. But tonight, the bulb was dark. I stood on the gravel driveway of the old Virginia farmhouse, holding my 5-year-old daughter Lily's hand, the November wind cutting through the Blue Ridge Mountains and straight into my bones. My husband Ryan was behind me, carrying a sweet potato casserole I'd spent all morning making, and a pecan pie from my bakery. The windows of the farmhouse glowed warm and golden. I could hear music inside, Etta James, Grandma's favorite. I could smell roasting turkey and wood smoke. I knocked. The door opened a crack. My mother's face appeared, half in shadow. She didn't open it wider. "Megan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" I almost laughed. "What do you mean? It's Thanksgiving. Grandma invited us 3 weeks ago." She called Lily personally. My mother glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. Her eyes were strange. Not cold exactly, but calculated. "There's been a change of plans," she said. "We decided to keep it small this year. Just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I said. She didn't blink. "You know what I mean, Megan. It's just Craig thinks it would be better. Fewer people. Less stress on Mother." Craig. My stepfather. The man who married my mother when I was 14 and spent the next 17 years treating me like a house guest who had overstayed her welcome. Craig, who had never once called me his daughter. Craig, who smiled at me the way you smile at a stranger's dog. Polite and distant and utterly without warmth. "Mom," I said. "Lily has been talking about this for weeks. She made Grandma a painting." "I know, sweetheart," my mother said, "and that's lovely. But tonight isn't a good night. Maybe we can do a separate dinner next weekend. Just us." She was already closing the door. Ryan stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm. "Diane, it's 28 degrees out here. We drove 3 hours from Richmond with a 5-year-old. At least let us come in and say hello to Helen." My mother's eyes flickered to Ryan, and something hardened in her expression. "I'm sorry, Ryan. It's not my call. Craig arranged everything this year. He wants it small." Before I could respond, the door closed. Not slammed, just closed. Quietly, deliberately. The lock turned with a soft click that felt louder than a gunshot. Before I tell you what happened when my grandmother found out what they did, and believe me, what she did was something none of us saw coming, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now. I love seeing how far this community reaches. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I thought I would. But standing there on that dark porch, listening to the muffled laughter leaking through the walls, I felt something else, something harder than sadness. It was clarity. Lily tugged on my coat sleeve. "Mommy, why can't we go inside?" I knelt down to her level. The wind pushed her hair across her face, and I tucked it behind her ear. Her cheeks were red from the cold. She was wearing the little turkey dress she'd picked out herself, the one with the sequined feathers. She'd been so proud of it. "We're gonna have our own Thanksgiving, baby," I said, "with hot chocolate and your favorite movie. But I want to show Grandma Helen my painting." She was clutching a rolled-up piece of construction paper in her mitten, a watercolor turkey with my grandmother's name spelled out in wobbly letters across the top. Helin. Close enough for a 5-year-old. "I know, sweetheart. We'll show her another time." Ryan picked Lily up and carried her to the car. He buckled her in, turned on the heater, and then came back to where I was still standing on the porch. He didn't say anything. He just put his arms around me and held me for a long moment. "I'm done," I whispered into his chest. "I'm done trying." "I know," he said. "Let's go home." We got in the car. Ryan drove. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark mountains. Lily was quiet in the back, hugging her painting. This was the pattern. It had always been the pattern. When my mother married Craig, I was 14, and Austin was 12. Austin was Craig's son from his first marriage, a soft, spoiled boy who broke things and blamed others. Craig adored him. My mother, desperate to keep Craig happy, adopted his adoration as her own. Within a year, the household had quietly reorganized itself around a simple principle. Austin was the priority. I was the afterthought. Austin got a brand new truck for his 16th birthday. I got a used bike and a lecture about being grateful. Austin's college was fully paid for. I worked 2 jobs and took out loans. Austin dropped out twice, started a real estate company with Craig's money, failed, started another one, failed again. I opened a bakery from nothing. Built it up customer by customer, 5 a.m., wake-ups, flour in my hair, burns on my arms. Within 3 years, I was turning a profit and had a small staff. Nobody in my family ever visited the bakery. Not once. But every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday, I showed up. I brought gifts. I smiled. I swallowed the slights and the silence and the way my mother's eyes always drifted to Austin first when she walked into a room. I kept showing up because I thought if I was just good enough, patient enough, generous enough, eventually they'd see me. Tonight, standing on a dark porch in 28-degree weather, while my daughter asked why Grandma didn't want her painting, I finally understood. They saw me perfectly clearly. They just didn't care. We were maybe 15 minutes down Route 29 when my phone rang. The screen lit up the dark car. Grandma Helen. My stomach clenched. Ryan glanced at me. I stared at the phone for 2 full rings, then answered. Megan. Her voice was sharp. Where are you? I just came out of the kitchen and Diane tells me you couldn't make it, that Lily has a fever. Lily doesn't have a fever, Grandma. I paused. We came. Mom turned us away at the door. She said Craig wanted to keep it small. Silence. Not a comfortable silence. The kind of silence that feels like the air before lightning. When Grandma Helen spoke again, her voice was different, lower, controlled. The voice of a woman who had raised 4 children alone after my grandfather died, who had run a 200-acre farm by herself for 30 years, who had never in her life backed down from anything. Turn around, she said. Come back right now. Use the side door through the garden. I'll be waiting. Ryan looked at me. I looked at Lily in the rearview mirror. She had fallen asleep, the painting still in her hand. Grandma, I don't want to cause a scene, I said. You won't be causing anything, she said. I will. Ryan turned the car around without me asking. The drive back felt endless. Every mile was a negotiation between the part of me that wanted to protect my daughter from this family and the part of me that trusted Grandma Helen completely. She was the only person in that house who had ever treated me like I mattered. When I graduated college, she drove 3 hours to be there. When I opened the bakery, she was my first customer. When Lily was born, she held her for 2 hours straight and cried. We pulled up to the farmhouse. This time, Grandma Helen was waiting at the garden gate. She was wearing her old camel coat, and her reading glasses were pushed up on her head. Her white hair was pinned up neatly. She looked small in the darkness, but she stood like a woman who owned every inch of the ground beneath her. She walked to the car and opened Lily's door. Gently, she unbuckled the sleeping girl and lifted her into her arms. Lily stirred. Grandma Helen? Hello, my little artist, Grandma whispered. I heard you made me something beautiful. Lily smiled sleepily and held up the crumpled painting. Grandma Helen looked at it as if it were a Rembrandt. This is the most wonderful turkey I have ever seen, she said. Let's go put it on the refrigerator where everyone can see it. We followed her through the garden and in through the side door. The kitchen was warm and smelled like sage and butter. From the dining room, I could hear conversation and clinking glasses. There were at least 20 people in there. Neighbors, family friends, Craig's business associates. So much for keeping it small. Ryan put his hand on the small of my back. I'm right here, he said quietly. Whatever happens, I'm right here. Grandma Helen set Lily down in a kitchen chair with a plate of warm rolls and a glass of apple cider. Then she straightened her coat, smoothed her hair, and walked into the dining room. The conversation didn't die immediately. It faded, like a radio being turned down. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched. Grandma Helen walked to the head of the table, where Craig was sitting in the chair that had always been hers. He looked up, surprised. She didn't ask him to move. She just stood there, and after a moment he stood and stepped aside. Thank you, she said, sitting down. She looked around the table. I saw my mother, her face frozen in a pasted-on smile. Craig, his jaw tight. Austin, slouched in his chair, scrolling through his phone with one hand and holding a bourbon with the other. I'd like to say something before we continue, Grandma Helen said. Her voice was conversational, pleasant even. But I had known her my whole life, and I could hear the steel underneath. Of course, Mom, my mother said brightly. She was already nervous. I could tell by the way her fingers were turning her wine glass. My granddaughter Megan is here tonight, Grandma Helen said. She arrived about an hour ago with her husband and her daughter. She drove 3 hours to be here. She paused. She was turned away at the front door, told there was no room, told Craig wanted to keep it small. The table went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes moved from Grandma Helen to my mother. My mother's smile became rigid. That's a misunderstanding, my mother said quickly. I just thought with the caterers and the table, I didn't want. Grandma Helen raised a hand. The gesture was small, but my mother stopped talking as if someone had pressed a mute button. Diane, Grandma said, this is my house, my table, my Thanksgiving. I invited Megan personally. I called her 3 weeks ago. I called Lily on her little pink telephone and asked her to bring me a painting. She looked at my mother with an expression that was worse than anger. It was disappointment. You told her there was no room in a house with 14 empty bedrooms. Mom, it wasn't like that, my mother started. Then what was it like? Tell me. Explain to everyone here why my granddaughter stood on a dark porch in the freezing cold with a 5-year-old child while the rest of us ate stuffing and drank wine. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her eyes were filling with tears, the same tears I'd seen 100 times, the ones that appeared on cue whenever she was cornered. Craig cleared his throat. Helen, I think we're blowing this out of proportion. It was a miscommunication. We didn't mean— You didn't mean what, Craig? Grandma Helen said, turning to him. You didn't mean for me to find out? Then she did something that changed everything. She reached into the pocket of her camel coat and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thin, maybe 3 or 4 pages inside. She set it on the table in front of her. While Megan was being turned away from this house, she said, I was in my study. I was looking for my insurance documents because I had a meeting with my attorney next week. She tapped the envelope. I found something else instead. The room was absolutely still. Austin, for the first time, looked up from his phone. Grandma Helen opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. She held them up so everyone could see. These are property transfer documents, she said, dated 6 months ago, signed by me. Transferring 38 acres of my east parcel, the parcel with the creek, the old barn, and the timber rights to something called Ridgeline Capital Holdings, LLC. She looked at Austin. Your company, Austin. Austin's face drained of color. I never signed these documents, Grandma Helen said. I have never heard of Ridgeline Capital Holdings, and I certainly never agreed to give away land that has been in my family for 4 generations. My mother stood up. Mom, I can explain. Sit down, Diane. My mother sat. Grandma Helen turned the documents over. On the back of the last page was a notary stamp. I called the notary this morning, Grandma said. A woman named Brenda Hoff. She was very forthcoming when I told her I was considering contacting the state attorney general. She told me that Craig brought these documents to her office, that Craig told her I was elderly and housebound and had authorized him to sign on my behalf. She looked at Craig. You forged my signature. Craig's face went from red to white. Helen, that's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime, Grandma said. She pulled out one more piece of paper from the envelope. This is a letter from my attorney confirming that the transfer is fraudulent and that he is preparing to refer the matter to the county prosecutor. Austin stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the wood floor. This is insane. Those acres were going to be mine anyway. You always said the land would stay in the family. You are not my family, Grandma Helen said quietly. My family doesn't steal from me. My family doesn't forge my name. And my family doesn't shut my granddaughter out in the cold to make sure no one notices. She turned to me. I was still standing in the doorway, my heart hammering. Ryan was beside me, his hand on my shoulder. That's why they didn't want you here tonight, Megan, Grandma said. You know this land better than anyone. You walk the east parcel every time you visit. You would have asked about the surveyor's stakes. You would have noticed the new fence line. She paused. You always notice. I felt the room tilt. Everything clicked into place. The last-minute disinvitation, the dark porch light, the lock on the door. It was never about capacity. It was never about Craig wanting a small gathering. It was about making sure I didn't walk the property, didn't ask questions, didn't notice that 38 acres of my grandmother's land had been stolen from under her. My mother was crying now, real tears this time, not the performance kind. She knew what was coming. Diane, Craig, Grandma Helen said. She folded her hands on the table. You have lived in the cottage on this property for 12 years. Rent-free, utilities paid. I did this because you are my daughter, and I believed you loved this land the way I do. She stood up. I'd like you to leave now, she said. Not just the table, the property, the cottage, all of it. Mom, you can't be serious, my mother gasped. It's Thanksgiving night. Where are we supposed to go? Grandma Helen looked at her. There's a Holiday Inn on Route 15. I checked this afternoon. They have plenty of room. The callback hit me like a wave. The room felt it too. Several guests exchanged glances. One of the neighbors, an older woman I recognized from church, actually covered her mouth with her hand. Austin slammed his glass on the table. You're going to regret this. I'll get a lawyer. You can't just— You already had a lawyer, Grandma said. He forged documents for you. And Austin, she looked at him the way you look at something you've finally decided to throw away. I'm removing you from my will entirely. I'll be meeting with my attorney Monday morning. Everything, the farm, the land, the accounts goes to Megan. She's just a baker, my mother spat, her composure finally cracking. She makes cakes. She doesn't know anything about managing an estate. Ryan stepped forward. For the first time all night, he raised his voice. She built a business from nothing, while your son was busy stealing from his own grandmother. Don't talk about my wife like that." The room was silent. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway behind us, clutching her painting. She looked around at the faces with big, confused eyes. "Why is everyone sad?" she asked. Grandma Helen crossed the room, knelt down, and took Lily's hand. "Nobody's sad, sweetheart," she said. "We're just making more room at the table." She looked up at me. "Come sit down, Megan, both of you, right here next to me." I looked at my mother. She was standing now, mascara running down her cheeks, gripping the back of her chair. Craig was already putting on his coat, his face rigid with fury. Austin was typing furiously on his phone, probably calling a lawyer who couldn't help him. I felt something loosen in my chest, something old and heavy and tired. For 31 years, I had carried the weight of trying to earn a place in a family that had never wanted to give me one. I had measured myself against their indifference and always come up short. But standing here, in my grandmother's house, watching the people who had hurt me finally face what they'd done, I realized the weight had never been mine to carry. It was theirs. Craig, Austin, my mother, they filed out of the farmhouse one by one. My mother paused at the door and looked at me. For a moment, I thought she might say something real, something honest, but she just shook her head and walked out into the cold. The heavy oak door closed behind them. The sound of gravel crunching under tires faded into the night. Grandma Helen walked over to the stereo in the corner and turned up the Etta James. "Well," she said, adjusting her glasses, "that turkey isn't going to carve itself." A few of the guests laughed, nervously at first, then genuinely. The tension broke like a fever. Ryan helped Grandma carry the turkey to the table. Lily sat in the chair next to Grandma Helen, her painting taped to the wall behind them. Grandma made a toast with apple cider instead of wine, so Lily could raise her glass too. "To the people who show up," she said, "and to the doors that close behind us, so better ones can open." I ate more that night than I had in years. The food tasted different when you weren't bracing for a slight that never came. After dinner, while Ryan and Lily were asleep by the fire, Grandma Helen and I sat on the porch. She had turned the porch light back on. We wrapped ourselves in quilts and drank chamomile tea and watched our breath make clouds in the cold air. "I should have seen it sooner," she said. "The land transfer, the way they were keeping you away. I should have paid more attention." "You caught it," I said. "That's what matters." She shook her head. "You know what bothers me most? It's not the money. It's not the land. It's that they used my own daughter to lock you out of my house." She looked at me. "You and Lily are the only ones who ever came here because you wanted to, not because you wanted something." We sat in silence for a while. Somewhere in the valley, a dog barked. The stars over the Blue Ridge were sharp and bright. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "Thank you for turning the porch light back on." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "It was never off, baby. Your mother just unscrewed the bulb." 1 year later, the farmhouse smelled like cinnamon and brown sugar. I was in the kitchen at 5 a.m., the way I always am, but this time I wasn't baking for customers. I was making Lily's birthday cake, a 3-layer vanilla bean with buttercream frosting and little fondant flowers that she'd designed herself. Ryan was outside, splitting wood for the fireplace. Through the kitchen window, I could see his breath in the early morning light. Lily was upstairs, still asleep, her room decorated with the paintings she'd been making all year. Grandma Helen had hung every single one. A lot had changed in 12 months. The county prosecutor had filed charges against Craig for forgery and fraud. The case was working its way through the courts. Austin's company had collapsed under the weight of its own lies. He'd moved to Florida, changed his phone number, and hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since. My mother had sent me one letter, 3 months after that Thanksgiving. It was 4 pages long and mentioned the word sorry exactly 0 times. It was mostly about how I had embarrassed her in front of her friends. I didn't write back. Grandma Helen had signed the farm over to me officially, not just in her will, but now, while she was alive, because she said she wanted to watch me take care of it. Ryan and I had moved in. We renovated the cottage that Craig and my mother had lived in and turned it into a studio where I developed new recipes for the bakery. Grandma kept her bedroom in the main house and spent her mornings reading on the porch and her afternoons teaching Lily how to garden. The east parcel, the 38 acres they'd tried to steal, was still there. The old barn, the creek, the timber. I walked it every Sunday morning, the way I always had. But now it felt different. It felt like mine. Not because of a piece of paper, but because I was the one who had always loved it. Lily came downstairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She was 6 now, taller, missing her 2 front teeth. She climbed onto a kitchen stool and watched me pipe frosting with the intense concentration of a surgeon. "Mommy," she said. "Yes, baby." Do you remember when we went to Grandma's house and Mommy Diane said we couldn't come in? I stopped piping. I looked at her. I remember, I said. She nodded seriously. I'm glad we came back. Me too, sweetheart. She stuck her finger in the frosting bowl. I let her. Grandma Helen came into the kitchen, already quest, her reading glasses on her head. She kissed the top of Lily's head, stole a piece of bacon from the counter, and sat down at the table with her crossword puzzle. Ryan came in from outside, stamping snow off his boots, and poured himself a coffee. He kissed me on the forehead. Lily showed him the frosting on her finger like a trophy. This was my family, not the one I was born into, the one that was built, piece by piece, out of the people who showed up. I looked around the kitchen, at the paintings still taped to the wall, at the quilts on every chair, at the porch light burning steady through the window. And now I'm looking at you. If you're watching this right now, and you know what it feels like to stand on the wrong side of a closed door, if you've spent years bending yourself into shapes trying to fit into a family that was never going to make room for you, if you've ever watched your child ask a question that broke your heart and you didn't know how to answer, I need you to hear me. You are not too much. You are not too difficult. You are not the reason they can't love you. Some people's love has a capacity limit, and it has nothing to do with you. Stop unscrewing the porch light for people who walk past it anyway. Turn it on, leave it on, and let the people who actually want to find you. Because the ones who matter, they'll drive 3 hours in the cold. They'll bring a casserole and a painting and a little girl in a turkey dress. They'll stand on your porch in 28-degree weather and knock. And when you open the door, let them in.